Take a moment. If you're comfortable, close your eyes for a moment. I know there's a risk in that. It's the end of the day, end of the week. See the sun. Perhaps you saw that sun we got this afternoon. Perhaps you even saw light over the lake. See the Shabbat candles. See yourself at another time lighting Hanukkah candles. Perhaps it's the 8th night of Hanukkah, all the lights burning brightly. See that those candles on the Seder table, perhaps in a grandparent's candlesticks, the light shining radiantly on friends and family. Perhaps you lit a yahrzeit candle, or you have a Shiva candle lit at home, that light reminding you of the bright soul that you've lost. Perhaps you have a childhood memory of sneaking into your sanctuary as a kid in your own synagogue and watching the eternal light, sneaking in to make sure it was still lit even when the door shut and the lights were out. Or you see our Ner Tamid, sparkling, sort of shining orange through the gold threads. Perhaps you've actually lit the Ner Tamid in the Perlman sanctuary, that candle put inside. See light. Think of light, the lights that inspire you, that mark sacred space in your lives. I invite you to open your eyes, unless, of course, you've fallen asleep. Light. We notice it, or we don't notice it until it's not there. How many here watched the light of the Olympic flame last Friday, just a week ago? Good video if you watch it. If you haven't, it's okay. We've watched it at some point in our lives. A few minutes ago, we illumined our sanctuary with more than just the electric lights, but with a bar mitzvah, lighting Shabbat candles. We turned to the Ner Tamid. If it were Hanukkah or another festival, we might have our own menorah over there lit. We are surrounded by light. We might have lit that yahrzeit candle. Perhaps somebody had a birthday this week and celebrated with something really delicious with a candle on top. What is it like on one of these dark days of winter to come home to a dark space and flip on the switch and feel that warmth on a cold day? Or seeing the sun as we did today, but we don't always see in Chicago winters. Light. It's powerful, even mystical, and can change our emotions. And light is key in our Jewish tradition. Torah begins with the creation, light and dark, day and night. Yahi or, God says, let there be light. Earlier in our service, we read together Ma'ariv Aravim, the prayer that praised God who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light. Our Torah portion this Shabbat begins with light. Our ancestors were amidst very detailed instructions about how to build a portable sanctuary that God only knows how, but they carried through the wilderness. In the very beginning it says, instruct the Israelites to bring clear olive oil for kindling the lamps regularly. They had a 7-branched gold candelabrum that they were creating. It might have looked something like that, we're not sure. They're artist representations. And they were carrying that through the wilderness. That was lighting their way. Think about that, the darkness of the desert before they had none of our flashlights, electric lights, cell phone lights, all those. Next week, we read of Moses in communication with God. Whenever Moses leaves the conversations with God and goes back to the people, he would be surrounded by an aura of light, the light of the divine. Light in these instances, in our Torah, and our prayer, and our calendar, is about creation. It's about God's presence in a sacred space. And it's about sacred gathering like we do tonight. When we look to our practice, we think about light. When do we light candles? The beginning of a holiday. We mark the sanctity of time. We initiate our holidays. Interestingly, in Judaism, light has even richer meaning. At a symbolic level, it connotes goodness and righteousness. In Yom Kippur, we say, Or Zarua Lat Sadiq, light is sown for the righteous. And Torah is equated with light, guiding our path with mitzvot. So we have in our lives the primal brightness of the sun and the moon and the stars, and we have the deep meaning in our Jewish tradition. So much for us to consider what light does. And some of us did just that last Shabbat. Last Shabbat, 22 women of our congregation gathered for our 15th women's retreat. That's pretty amazing. We gathered on by Zoom, but we gathered very powerfully. The last week's Torah portion talked about building the sanctuary and creating the menorah, that 7-branched candelabrum that traveled with our ancestors. We reflected together about what is sanctuary, what is safe space, what is sacred space. We studied text about light, about Torah, and we asked ourselves questions, two in particular. We asked ourselves, where is your sanctuary? And what brings light to that sanctuary? And from there, we created. We took the age-old concept of midrash, that is to dig deep and explore the meaning of the text. The rabbis did that citing other texts, and we studied the rabbis' texts. And then we did something else. We brought art to Torah, and Torah to art, and all of it to our lives. We reflected on what we'd studied in those commentaries in the Torah portion, the importance of light in the sanctuary and the creativity of the menorah. The commentators say that that 7-branched menorah in the wilderness was designed maybe to look like flowers or pomegranates or other things that came from nature. It was great detail. We studied the commentary and then we created. We reflected on our lives and we asked ourselves again, what are our sanctuaries and what brings them light? Each woman participating spoke to her own sanctuary and light source. Let me share with you what some of them said. They said, sunlight hitting the water, mountains and the ocean in Hawaii, sunrise and sunset over the horizon, a childhood home lit by holiday candles in the window, sunlight and its rays of color, Shabbat and its peaceful tranquility and stillness, a metaphorical light. The color and light of Shabbat candles wherever they are lit, at home or on our way. The beach, the sun and relaxation bringing light to the soul. And Torah, representing our Jewish mission to be, or legoyim, a light unto the nations of the world with our ethical acts. The kitchen window and its view to the natural world, the desert, and the changing light and color over it. Those words you just heard were what were represented. You may have noticed when you came in, our paper midrash. And at the conclusion of our service, I invite you to go look. We've created paper midrashim, representations of those words you just heard, of our interpretations made with Torah. They are deliberately rough around the edges. We didn't draw, we didn't cut. We took tissue paper and tore the paper to make representations, to illustrate the colors and the shapes we saw in Torah portion, to convey how Torah spoke to our souls and to our minds. And while I couldn't arrange for sunlight to come through tonight, I wish I could, I invite you to look at another day. They'll be up all week. If you're here tomorrow you can see that. You'll see the sun shining through them, because they're backed into clear contact paper, and you'll see the light coming through in new ways, and the color bringing new color and light to our sanctuary, which, as some of you know, when it was designed by Minoru Yamasaki, he called it the Sanctuary of Light. So I invite you to go back to the images of light you saw in your mind's eye as I started. I invite you, as you leave the sanctuary on Shabbat, this Shabbat, at the end of the service, to look at the images. Some will be very clear, some will be very abstract, but see how they move you. Think about, what is your sanctuary? It could be right here. It could be your table with Shabbat candlesticks. It could be somewhere out beautiful in nature. And what brings light to your sanctuary? Ask yourself, what are my sanctuaries? What brings me light? And how can I stop to acknowledge it on this Shabbat and the days to come? Shabbat Shalom.